Three German shepherds was stuck inside a billboard sign. What baby did next left everyone in tears. The storm hit Riverside at exactly 3:17 a.m., but what happened next will absolutely shock you. Before we begin this incredible story, hit that like button, share with someone who loves dogs, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from right now. Tommy Carter shot up in his small bed, his green eyes wide with terror, his tiny hands pressed against his ears, but the sound wouldn't stop. "Mommy! Daddy!" His voice cracked through the darkness. The dogs are crying inside the sky. Sarah Carter stumbled into her son's room, her nurse's instincts kicking in, despite the exhaustion pulling at her bones. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Tommy's tear-streaked face for a split second. "Sweetie, it's just the storm," she whispered, pulling him close. Her scrub still smelled like the hospital disinfectant from her 12-hour shift. "There are no dogs in the sky." "No, Mommy, listen." Tommy pushed away from her embrace, his small body trembling. "They're stuck in the big picture, 3 of them. They're so scared." Michael Carter appeared in the doorway, his construction worker's hands rough as he rubbed sleep from his eyes. "What's going on?" Thunder crashed overhead, making the windows rattle. The rain hammered against the roof like 1,000 desperate fingers tapping for help. "Tommy thinks he hears dogs," Sarah explained, smoothing their son's dark hair. "Baby, you had a nightmare, that's all." "It's not a nightmare." Tommy's voice rose to a pitch that made both parents freeze. Their usually calm 5-year-old was shaking violently now, pointing toward his bedroom window. "Look at the big picture. The dogs are inside it. They told me their names." Michael and Sarah exchanged that look parents share when their child says something that doesn't quite make sense. Michael walked to the window, pulling back the dinosaur curtains Tommy had picked out for his birthday. Through the sheets of rain, he could barely make out the highway in the distance. Lightning struck again, and for a moment, the massive billboard near Route 47 lit up like a movie screen. "That billboard?" Michael asked, turning back to his son. "Tommy, that's just an old advertisement. It's been empty for years." "They're inside it." Tommy scrambled out of bed, pressing his small palms against the cold window glass. "Scout is hurt. Bella is crying. Duke can't breathe good." The names tumbled from his lips like he'd known these dogs his whole life. "Daddy, please! We have to help them." Sarah felt her heart skip. The specificity of the names, the raw desperation in Tommy's voice. This wasn't like his usual imaginative games. "Michael," she said quietly, "maybe we should—" "Check it out in the morning," Michael finished, though something cold was settling in his stomach. "Tommy, even if there were dogs there, we can't go out in this storm. It's dangerous." Tommy's legs gave out. He slid down the wall, sobbing so hard his whole body shook. "They've been there for 2 days, he whispered between gasps. "No water, no food. They're dying, Daddy. Scout told me they're dying." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah knelt beside her son, and when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that made her years of medical training feel suddenly useless. Tommy's pupils were dilated, but not from fear. It was like he was seeing something beyond the room, beyond the storm. "How do you know it's been 2 days?" she asked carefully. Tommy wiped his nose with his pajama sleeve. "Scout showed me. In my head, like pictures that move." He grabbed his mother's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. The thunder scared them into the big sign. "They went through a little door, but now it won't open. They're trapped, Mommy, really trapped." Michael was already pulling on his work boots. "I'll drive by and look," he said, grabbing his rain jacket from the hook by Tommy's door. Just to ease his mind. "In this storm?" Sarah stood up, torn between concern for her husband and the inexplicable certainty in Tommy's voice. "I'll be careful." Michael kissed her forehead, then knelt to Tommy's level. "If there are dogs there, buddy, I'll find them." "I promise." Tommy threw his arms around his father's neck. "The little door is on the back side," he whispered. "Behind the ladder. It's stuck because the metal got bent in the wind." Michael pulled back, staring at his son. "How could you possibly know that?" "Duke showed me," Tommy said simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. 20 minutes later, Michael's truck headlights cut through the rain as he pulled onto the shoulder near the billboard. The structure loomed above him, 30 feet of rusted metal and peeling advertisement for a car dealership that had closed 3 years ago. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the storm. The rain hit him like ice-cold needles. He circled to the back of the billboard, his work boots slipping in the mud. His flashlight beam found the maintenance ladder, and just as Tommy had said, there was a small access hatch behind it. The metal door was indeed bent, jammed shut by what looked like wind damage. Michael pressed his ear against the cold metal. At first, he heard nothing but rain and wind. Then, so faint he almost missed it, came a sound that made his blood run cold. A whimper. Then another. And another. "Jesus Christ!" he breathed. He grabbed the door handle and pulled with all his construction worker's strength. It didn't budge. He tried again, bracing his foot against the billboard's support beam. Nothing. His phone was already in his hand, Sarah's number glowing on the screen. "They're here," he said the moment she answered. 3 dogs, just like Tommy said. They're trapped inside the billboard structure. "How is that possible?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know, but I can hear them. The access door is completely jammed. I need tools." He paused, rain streaming down his face. "Sarah, how did Tommy know?" "He's been sitting by the window since you left," she said. "He keeps saying their names over and over. Scout, Bella, and Duke. He says Scout was in the army." Michael felt the world tilt slightly. "What? I know how it sounds, but Michael, he's describing things, specific things. He says Bella has a white mark on her ear shaped like a heart. He says Duke has a scar on his back leg from a fire." "Sarah?" "I know," her voice cracked. "I know it's impossible. But what if it's not?" Michael looked up at the billboard towering above him, rain streaming off its edges like a waterfall. From inside, the whimpering had turned to weak barking, as if the dogs knew someone was there. "I'm calling the fire department," he said. "An animal control. Someone has to be able to get them out." But when the fire department arrived an hour later, the situation proved more complicated than anyone expected. Captain Rick Harrison stood in the rain, shaking his head as he examined the structure. "This billboard is privately owned by Midwest Advertising," he explained to Michael. "They went bankrupt last year. Legally, we can't damage it without authorization." "There are dogs dying in there!" Michael shouted over the storm. "I understand that, sir, but—" Captain Harrison was interrupted by one of his crew members. "Cap, you need to hear this." The firefighter, a young woman named Chen, had her ear pressed against the metal. "These aren't just any dogs. Listen to their bark patterns." Captain Harrison frowned but leaned in to listen. After a moment, his face changed. "That's military training. Those are K9 unit signals." "What?" Michael stepped closer. "How can you tell?" "I served in Iraq," Chen explained. "Military dogs are trained to bark in specific patterns. These dogs are calling for backup." She pulled out her phone. "We need to contact Fort Bradley. They had a K9 transport go missing 3 days ago during the first storm." While Chen made calls, Michael drove home to find Tommy hadn't moved from his spot by the window. The boy's face was pale, his eyes red from crying. "Did you find them?" he asked the moment Michael walked in. "Yes, buddy. You were right. They're there." Tommy's face crumpled with relief, but then immediately tensed again. "They're getting weaker," he whispered. "Scout says they tried everything. They tried to dig through the metal. Bella hurt her paws trying. Duke keeps telling them not to give up, but Scout knows." He trailed off, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. Sarah pulled Michael into the kitchen. "This is scaring me," she admitted. "How does he know these things?" "The firefighter said they're military dogs." "A transport went missing." Michael ran his hands through his wet hair. "Maybe Tommy heard about it on the news?" "We don't watch the news around him. You know that." Sarah's hands were shaking as she poured coffee. "Michael, what if he really can hear them somehow?" Before Michael could answer, Tommy's scream pierced the air. They ran to the living room to find their son on his knees, hands pressed to his temples. "It hurts," he cried. "Bella's scared. Someone's hitting the metal. It's so loud." Michael's phone rang. It was Captain Harrison. "We've got a problem. The storm is getting worse. The billboard is swaying dangerously. If we try to cut into it now, the whole thing could collapse." "How long can they survive in there? Without water? In this heat building up from no ventilation? Maybe another day. Maybe less." Michael looked at his son, who was now curled in Sarah's arms, whispering something over and over. When he got closer, he could hear the words, "I'm here, Scout. I'm here, Bella. I'm here, Duke. Don't give up. Please don't give up." By morning, the storm had passed, but Riverside had a new problem. Word had spread about the trapped dogs. Michael had made one phone call to his brother, who posted on social media, and within hours, the Billboard dogs was trending. News vans lined up along Route 47. Crowds gathered behind police barriers. Tommy stood at the fence the police had erected, his small hands gripping the chain link. He hadn't eaten breakfast, hadn't touched his favorite juice box. "How can I eat when they're starving?" he had asked his mother, and the simple innocence of the question had left her speechless. "Tommy!" A reporter pushed a microphone toward him. "Is it true you can hear the dogs?" Sarah stepped protectively in front of her son, but Tommy moved around her. "They're not just dogs," he said, his young voice carrying a weight that made the crowd fall silent. "Scout saved soldiers. Bella found sick kids in a hospital. Duke pulled a family from a fire." "How do you know that, son?" the reporter asked. Tommy looked directly into the camera, his green eyes blazing with certainty. "Because they told me. And they're dying while everyone stands around talking." The crowd erupted in mixed reactions. Some called him a liar, others proclaimed him a prophet, but one voice cut through the chaos, an elderly woman pushing through the crowd with surprising strength. "That's Scout!" Mrs. Rodriguez clutched a photograph to her chest. "That's my nephew's dog from Fort Bradley. Scout saved 6 men in Afghanistan, including my nephew." She held up the photo, a German shepherd with distinctive markings. "The transport truck crashed 5 miles from here. They never found the dogs." The crowd's mood shifted. These weren't just dogs, they were heroes. Mayor Robert Hutchinson arrived within the hour, his face set in the expression of a man who didn't want to be there. "We cannot authorize the destruction of private property," he announced to the crowd. "I've contacted the bankruptcy lawyers handling Midwest Advertising's assets. They need 48 hours to review the request." "They don't have 48 hours. Tommy's voice rang out clear and strong. The mayor's jaw tightened. "Young man, I understand you're upset, but your son got bit by a dog," Tommy said suddenly, his eyes unfocused like he was seeing something else. "When he was 7, at the park. You're scared of dogs now." The mayor went white. "How did you—" "Scout says fear makes people do wrong things sometimes," Tommy continued. "But being scared doesn't mean you can let heroes die." The crowd was dead silent. The mayor's hands trembled as he adjusted his tie. That's irrelevant to this situation." "Is it?" A man stepped forward from the crowd. Jake Morrison, his military bearing obvious despite his civilian clothes. "Because I'm looking at a situation where American military heroes are dying while bureaucrats shuffle papers." He pulled out his phone, showing a video. "This is Scout saving my unit in Kandahar. This dog took 3 bullets meant for me." The crowd's energy shifted, becoming something dangerous and determined. Signs appeared. "Save the hero dogs." People began chanting. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the town veterinarian, pushed through to the mayor. "Sir, I've examined the situation. These dogs have maybe 24 hours before organ failure begins. The temperature inside that metal structure, without water, I said 48 hours for legal review," the mayor repeated, but his voice wavered. That's when Tommy did something no one expected. He walked straight up to the Billboard support pole and began climbing the maintenance ladder. "Tommy!" Sarah screamed, running forward. Michael was already moving, but Tommy was surprisingly fast, his small body scrambling up the wet metal rungs. "If nobody will help them, I will," he shouted. He made it 10 feet up before Michael caught him, pulling him into his arms as they both clung to the ladder. "Tommy, stop! They're dying, Daddy!" Tommy sobbed into his father's shoulder. "Scout can barely breathe." Bella stopped moving. "Duke is trying to keep them warm, but he's so tired. They're dying, and nobody cares." "I care," Michael whispered, holding his son tight as he climbed down. "We all care. Then why won't anyone help them?" The question hung in the air, carried by the news cameras to millions of screens across the country. A 5-year-old boy's simple question that no adult could answer. Jake Morrison stepped forward again. "Mayor Hutchinson, with all due respect, I've got 20 veterans here ready to take that billboard apart piece by piece. You can arrest us all if you want, but we're not letting those heroes die." The crowd roared approval. The mayor looked around, realizing he was losing control. "That would be destruction of property. I'd have to have you arrested." Then arrest us, said Chen, the firefighter from the night before. Arrest all of us. One by one, people stepped forward. Veterans, civilians, teenagers, elderly residents. Soon, over 100 people stood with Jake Morrison. Tommy pulled free from his father's arms and walked to the mayor. Scout says you're not a bad man, he said quietly, just a scared one. But Scout says being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you are scared. The mayor stared down at the boy, and for a moment, his carefully constructed political face cracked. My son, he said quietly. My son was traumatized by that attack. He still has nightmares. Duke has nightmares too, Tommy replied. About the fire. About the family he saved. He dreams about the little girl's voice calling for help, but he'd go back into the fire again. That's what makes him a hero. The mayor's phone rang. He answered it, listened, and his face changed. That was my father, he said slowly. He's watching the news. He wanted me to know that if I let those military dogs die, I'm no son of his. He looked at the crowd, then at Tommy. He's a veteran. Korea. Scout says your dad is a good man, Tommy said simply. The mayor pulled out his phone again. Get me the emergency city council on a conference call, he barked. We're having an immediate vote on an emergency rescue authorization. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Tommy wasn't celebrating. He'd walked back to the fence, his small fingers wrapped around the chain link, his eyes fixed on the billboard. Hold on, he whispered. We're coming. I promise we're coming. Sarah knelt beside him. Tommy, how do you really know all these things? Tommy turned to his mother, and for a moment, he looked far older than his 5 years. When I heard them crying in the storm, something opened in my head, like a door I didn't know was there, and now I can feel them, all of them, not just Scout, Bella, and Duke, all the dogs that are hurt and scared and need help. Tears rolled down his cheeks. It's loud, Mommy. So loud. Sarah pulled him close, feeling him tremble against her. Over his head, she met Michael's eyes, and she saw her own fear reflected there. Their son had changed. Something had awakened in him during that storm, something that connected him to those trapped dogs in a way that defied explanation. But there wasn't time to process it. The emergency authorization came through in record time, 15 minutes of heated debate that Tommy watched with an intensity that unnerved everyone around him. When the vote passed unanimously, he simply nodded and said, Scout says thank you. Jake Morrison's team moved in with military precision. They had cutting tools, extraction equipment, and a plan. But as they approached the billboard, Tommy grabbed Jake's arm. Wait, he said urgently. Not there. If you cut there, it'll collapse on them. Jake knelt down. Where should we cut, buddy? Tommy closed his eyes, and everyone watched as his face went through a series of expressions. Concentration, fear, determination. Duke is showing me, he whispered. He can see the metal above them. Cut here. He pointed to a specific spot on the support structure. And here. But go slow. Bella is right underneath that spot. Jake exchanged glances with his team. Everything in his military training said not to trust a 5-year-old's intuition about structural engineering. But something in Tommy's eyes... You heard him, Jake said. We cut where the boy says. As the rescue equipment roared to life, Tommy stood perfectly still, tears streaming down his face. I can feel their hope, he whispered to his mother. They know we're coming. Scout is trying to wake up Bella. Duke is barking to guide you. And indeed, from inside the billboard came a bark. Weak but deliberate, rhythmic like Morse code. That's military signaling, Chen confirmed, her eyes wide. He's indicating position. How could the boy know? Because they're connected, Sarah said quietly, holding her son as he trembled with the effort of maintaining whatever impossible link he'd formed with those dying dogs. God help us, they're connected. The cutting began, metal shrieking against metal, and Tommy flinched with each sound. It hurts their ears, he whimpered, but Scout says it's okay. It's the sound of rescue. The crowd pressed closer, hundreds of phones recording, as the rescue team worked to free 3 dogs that had somehow become symbols of something larger. Heroism abandoned, innocence fighting bureaucracy, and the inexplicable bond between a small boy and 3 German shepherds who'd found their voices through his pure heart. But what happened next would shake everyone to their core, because Tommy suddenly screamed, Stop! Stop cutting! Something's wrong. The tools went silent. What is it, Tommy? Jake asked urgently. Tommy's eyes were wide with terror. Bella, he gasped. She's not alone in there. The rescue team froze, their cutting tools still smoking in the morning air. Jake Morrison's hand tightened on his equipment as he stared at the 5-year-old boy, whose face had gone pale as winter snow. What do you mean she's not alone? Jake asked, his military instinct screaming that something was very wrong. Tommy's whole body shook as he pressed his palms against his temples. Puppies, he whispered, his voice cracking. Bella has puppies. 4 of them. They were born inside the Billboard 2 days ago. The crowd gasped collectively. Dr. Elena Vasquez pushed forward, her veterinary bag swinging at her side. That's impossible. A dog giving birth in that condition, in that space? She didn't have a choice. Tommy's voice rose to a pitch that made everyone step back. The puppies came early because she was so scared. Scout and Duke have been protecting them, keeping them warm. His green eyes blazed with an intensity that seemed impossible for such a small child. If you cut wrong, the metal will fall on them. Jake's team exchanged uncertain glances. This changed everything. Newborn puppies in that environment, without proper care, in extreme temperatures, their survival window was measured in hours, not days. Where exactly are the puppies? Jake asked, pulling out his phone to show Tommy a thermal imaging scan of the Billboard structure. Tommy studied the image, his finger tracing patterns only he seemed to understand. Here, he pointed to a corner of the internal structure. Bella made a nest from old papers and insulation. Duke gave her his own fur. He pulled it out so the babies would be warm. Chen, the firefighter, leaned in to look at the thermal scan. There is a heat cluster in that corner, smaller signatures. My God, he's right. The mayor, who had been standing at the edge of the crowd, pushed forward. This complicates the rescue significantly. We need specialized equipment. We need to move now, Tommy interrupted, his small voice carrying the authority of absolute certainty. One puppy isn't breathing right. Scout is trying to help, but he doesn't know what to do. Dr. Vasquez immediately took charge. Jake, we need to create an access point here. She indicated a spot on the billboard. If the puppies are newborns, we have minutes, not hours. Their body temperature regulation... I know, Jake cut her off, already directing his team. Chen, get the pediatric emergency kit from the ambulance. We're going to need warming blankets, oxygen, the works. As the team repositioned their equipment, Tommy suddenly grabbed his father's hand. Daddy, something's wrong. There are cars coming. Michael looked toward the road, seeing nothing unusual in the crowd of onlookers and news vans. What cars, buddy? Black ones? 3 of them. The men inside are angry. Tommy's pupils dilated as he stared at something no one else could see. Scout says they're the ones who lost the dogs. They don't want people to know. Before Michael could respond, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows pulled up to the police barrier. Men in dark suits emerged, their faces hidden behind sunglasses despite the overcast sky. The lead man flashed a badge at the nearest police officer. Federal investigation, we need this area cleared immediately. On whose authority? Mayor Hutchinson demanded, striding over with surprising courage for someone who'd been wavering just minutes before. Transport Security Administration, the man replied smoothly. Those dogs are classified military assets. Their rescue falls under federal jurisdiction. Classified? Jake Morrison laughed bitterly. They're dying animals, not state secrets. The federal agent's expression didn't change. Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the billboard and surrender any equipment you've... Liar! Tommy's voice cut through the tension like a blade. The boy had walked right up to the federal agent, his small frame trembling with rage. You're not here to save them. Scout says you're the ones who caused the crash. You were taking them somewhere bad. The agent looked down at the child with cold eyes. Someone needs to control this boy before... Before what? Sarah stepped forward, pulling Tommy against her. Before he tells everyone the truth? The crowd was pressing closer now, phones raised, recording everything. The agent seemed to realize he was losing control of the situation. These dogs were being transported to a classified research facility, he said carefully. Their unique training and capabilities make them valuable for national security. They were being sent to a laboratory, Tommy said, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. Scout shows me pictures. Cages, needles, tests. They weren't being retired, they were being experimented on. The crowd's mood shifted dangerously. Veterans in the crowd pushed forward, their faces dark with anger. Is that true? Jake Morrison's voice was deadly quiet. Were you sending war heroes to be lab rats? The agent's hand moved toward his jacket. Sir, I need you to... I served 3 tours in Afghanistan, Jake interrupted. Scout saved my life and 5 others. If you think I'm going to let you take him to some lab... The dogs are government property, the agent insisted. They belong to themselves, Tommy shouted, tears streaming down his face. They gave everything for us, and you want to hurt them more? Scout has metal in his body from saving soldiers. Bella can smell cancer because she loves helping sick kids. Duke's lungs are damaged from running into fires. Haven't they done enough? The crowd surged forward, and the police officers found themselves having to protect the federal agents rather than enforce their authority. Continue the rescue, Mayor Hutchinson ordered Jake, his voice carrying new steel. I don't care what papers they have. The lead agent pulled out his phone. You're making a serious mistake, Mayor. 1 phone call and... Make your call, the mayor replied. But those cameras, he gestured to the dozens of news crews, are broadcasting this live to millions of Americans. You want to be the one who let hero dogs die on national television? While the adults argued, Tommy had walked back to the billboard. He placed both hands on the cold metal and closed his eyes. I'm here, he whispered. All of you, Scout, Bella, Duke, and the babies. I'm here. Inside the structure, weak barking responded. Not just one dog, but all 3, their voices joining in a harmony that made everyone stop arguing and listen. They're saying thank you, Tommy translated, his voice soft but carrying in the sudden silence. They're saying they never gave up hope because they could feel us trying. Jake's team resumed cutting, following Tommy's precise directions. Every few seconds, the boy would call out adjustments. Stop! Duke is moving the puppies. Wait, Bella is trying to stand. Careful, Scout is right under that beam. It was like watching a conductor guide an orchestra, except the music was the sound of salvation being carved into metal. Dr. Vasquez had set up a makeshift triage station, laying out warming blankets, IV fluids, and oxygen masks, sized for both adult dogs and newborn puppies. Tommy, she called out, can you ask Scout about the puppy's conditions? Tommy's face scrunched in concentration. 2 boys, 2 girls. 1 girl isn't moving much. Scout has been breathing on her to keep her warm, but she's very small. The runt, Doctor, Vasquez murmured. She'll need immediate intervention. The federal agents hadn't left. They stood at the periphery, making phone calls, occasionally trying to assert authority. But the crowd had formed a human barrier between them and the rescue operation. Veterans, civilians, teenagers, all standing shoulder to shoulder, protecting the rescue effort. Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly woman who'd recognized Scout, began singing softly in Spanish. It was a lullaby, she later explained, that her nephew used to sing to Scout during their deployment. Other veterans joined in with their own songs, creating a strange, beautiful chorus that seemed to give the rescue team strength. Almost there, Jake announced, sweat dripping despite the cool morning. Tommy, where exactly? Now, Tommy shouted. Cut now. Duke has moved them all to the safe corner. The metal shrieked as the cutting tool bit through the last section. A piece of the billboard's inner structure fell away, revealing a dark opening. I'm going in, Jake said, grabbing a flashlight. No, Tommy said firmly. They don't know you. They're scared of big humans now. Let me... Absolutely not, Michael said, grabbing his son. You're not going in there. Then they won't come out, Tommy said simply. Scout is protecting Bella and the puppies. Duke is ready to fight anyone who comes close. They've been hurt by too many people. He's right, Chen said quietly. Traumatized military dogs won't respond to strangers, especially not in a confined space while protecting young. So what do we do? Sarah asked, her voice breaking. Tommy looked at his parents with eyes that seemed far too old for his face. You trust me, he said, like you always tell me to trust you. The silence stretched between them, parents and child locked in a moment that would define all their futures. I'll go in with him, Jake offered. I'm smaller than most of the team, and Scout knows my scent. He might remember. Scout remembers everything, Tommy interrupted. He says you smell like cigarettes and sadness, just like in Afghanistan, but also like hope. He says you kept his picture in your helmet. Jake's face crumbled. He did indeed have a photo of Scout tucked in his helmet during deployment, a good luck charm that had seen him through the worst fights of his life. Okay, Michael said, his voice rough, but you wear a safety harness, and if anything seems dangerous... Tommy was already being fitted with a small harness connected to a safety line. Dr. Vasquez handed him a small bag. Warming blankets for the puppies, she explained. Be very gentle. As Tommy approached the opening, the crowd fell completely silent. Even the federal agents stopped their phone calls to watch. The boy paused at the entrance, then did something unexpected. He started humming. It was a simple melody, almost tuneless, but something about it made everyone lean forward. What's he doing? Someone whispered. He's singing their song, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. He says every dog has a song in their heart. He's singing theirs. Tommy disappeared into the darkness of the billboard's interior. The safety line played out slowly as he crawled deeper inside. The crowd held its breath. 30 seconds passed. A minute, 2 minutes. Then, a sound that made everyone gasp. A puppy's cry. Weak, but unmistakably alive. He's got one! Dr. Vasquez called out, rushing forward as Tommy's small form backed out of the opening. Something tiny and dark cradled against his chest. It was a puppy, no bigger than a tennis ball, its eyes still sealed shut. Tommy handed it to Dr. Vasquez with infinite care, then immediately turned back to the opening. 3 more puppies, he announced. Then I'll get the adults. One by one, Tommy emerged with the puppies. Each time, he would whisper something to the tiny form before passing it to the waiting veterinarian. The 4th puppy, the small female Scout had been trying to save, wasn't breathing. Dr. Vasquez immediately began tiny chest compressions while Tommy watched, his face twisted in concentration. Scout says her name is Hope, he whispered. He named her Hope because she was born when they thought they were going to die. The crowd watched in silent agony as Dr. Vasquez worked on the tiny puppy. 30 seconds, a minute, then a tiny squeak. The puppy gasped, her little chest rising and falling. The cheer from the crowd could probably be heard for miles. Now the big dogs, Tommy said, but he was swaying on his feet, exhaustion clear in every line of his small body. They're scared to come out. Too many people. Clear the area, Jake ordered. Everyone back except essential personnel. The crowd reluctantly moved back, but Tommy shook his head. No, they need to see. Scout wants everyone to see that they're not mean dogs. They're not bad. They're just hurt. He crawled back into the opening. This time, the wait was longer. 5 minutes. 10. Michael had to physically restrain himself from going in after his son. Then, movement. But it wasn't Tommy who emerged first. It was Scout. The German Shepherd crawled out slowly, painfully. His fur was matted with dirt and what looked like dried blood. His ribs showed through his coat, but his eyes were fixed on Jake Morrison with a recognition that transcended the years and miles between Afghanistan and this moment. Jake fell to his knees. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Hey, Scout." The dog limped forward and, despite his obvious pain, performed a perfect military salute, one paw raised, head high, eyes forward. Then he collapsed into Jake's arms. Tommy emerged next, guiding Bella. The female German Shepherd was in worse condition, her body weak from giving birth in such horrible conditions. Her paws were indeed bloody from trying to claw through metal, but her eyes went immediately to her puppies, now wrapped in warming blankets in Dr. Vasquez's care. "It's okay, Bella," Tommy soothed. "Your babies are safe. You did so good. You're the best mama." Finally, Duke appeared. The massive German Shepherd's breathing was labored, his coat singed in places from old burns that had never properly healed. But he walked out with dignity, placing himself between the other dogs and the crowd, still protecting, still standing guard. "Duke says thank you," Tommy announced to the silent crowd. "He says thank you for not giving up." That's when the federal agent made his move. While everyone was focused on the dogs, he and his team had moved closer. "These animals are coming with us," he announced. "We have legal authority." "Over my dead body," Jake Morrison said, standing up with Scout still in his arms. "And mine," Chen added, stepping forward. "And mine. And mine. And mine." One by one, every person in the crowd stepped forward, forming a protective circle around the dogs and the Wilson family. The agent reached for his weapon, but Mayor Hutchinson's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The mayor held up his phone, showing a news feed. "This is trending worldwide. 3 million people are watching this live stream right now. You pull that weapon, and your career is over before you can blink." The agent's phone rang. He answered, his face growing paler with each word he heard. Finally, he lowered the phone. "We're withdrawing," he said through gritted teeth. "For now." As the black SUVs pulled away, Tommy collapsed. Sarah caught him before he hit the ground, his small body burning with fever. "He's in shock, doctor," Vasquez said, quickly checking his vitals. "The strain of whatever he's been doing, it's too much for his system." "Tommy," Sarah cried, cradling her son. The boy's eyes fluttered open. "Are they safe?" he whispered. "Yes, baby." "All of them. You saved them all." Tommy smiled weakly. "Scout says I need to rest now, but he'll watch over me. They all will." As the ambulance arrived for Tommy, something extraordinary happened. Scout, despite his injuries, pulled away from Jake and limped to Tommy's side. Bella followed, leaving her puppies for the first time. Duke brought up the rear. All 3 dogs formed a protective circle around the stretcher as Tommy was loaded into the ambulance. "They're coming with us," Sarah told the paramedic, who wisely didn't argue. The ride to the hospital was surreal. 3 injured German shepherds lying on the ambulance floor, their eyes never leaving the small boy on the stretcher. Tommy's hand hung down, and Scout positioned himself so the boy's fingers rested in his fur. At the hospital, the staff tried to say the dogs couldn't come in, but Dr. Vasquez intervened. "These are certified therapy animals," she lied smoothly, "and that boy needs them." Tommy was admitted for exhaustion and dehydration, but the doctors couldn't explain the heightened brain activity they saw on his scans. "It's like his neural pathways have been rewired, doctor," Chen explained to Michael and Sarah. "I've never seen anything like it." Tommy woke up 12 hours later to find all 3 dogs in his hospital room. Scout was on the bed beside him, Bella was curled at his feet, and Duke was standing guard at the door. "Hey!" Tommy whispered, and all 3 dogs' tails began wagging simultaneously. "Hey yourself," Sarah said, tears of relief streaming down her face. "You scared us." "I'm sorry." Tommy's hand found Scout's fur. "But I had to help them. They were calling for so long, and nobody could hear them but me." "How did you hear them, son?" Michael asked gently. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. "Remember when Grandma died, and you said sometimes love makes connections that we can't see but we can feel?" His parents nodded. "I think when animals hurt really bad, and when they need help really bad, that creates a connection too. And maybe most people can't feel it because they're too busy, or too grown up, or too scared. But I wasn't any of those things. I was just listening." A knock at the door interrupted them. Jake Morrison entered, followed by Chen and several other veterans from the rescue. "How's our hero doing?" Jake asked. "I'm not a hero," Tommy said quietly. "I just did what anybody should do." "That's exactly what makes you a hero," Jake replied. He pulled out a small box. "Tommy, this is something I've carried for 5 years. It's Scout's military service medal. He earned it in Afghanistan. I think he'd want you to have it." Tommy looked at Scout, and the dog gave a soft woof of approval. "We'll share it," Tommy decided. "Me and Scout and Bella and Duke. We're a team now." Dr. Vasquez arrived with an update on the puppies. "All 4 are thriving," she announced. "The little one, Hope, is still small but fighting hard." "Like her mama," Tommy said, reaching out to stroke Bella's head. "There's more, doctor," Vasquez continued. "The story has gone completely viral. I've had over 100 calls from people wanting to adopt the puppies." "No," Tommy said firmly. "Not yet. They need to stay with Bella until they're bigger. And then we have to make sure they go to the right families. Scout says too many military dogs end up with people who don't understand them." "Then what do you suggest?" Dr. Vasquez asked, genuinely curious. Tommy looked at each dog in turn, as if consulting with them. "Duke says the puppies should go to families of veterans, people who understand what it means to serve. Bella says one should go to a hospital to learn to help sick kids like she did. And Scout says..." Tommy paused, smiling. "Scout says Hope should stay with us." Michael and Sarah exchanged glances. They'd gone from a family of 3 to potentially a family of 3 plus 4 dogs in the span of 48 hours. "We'll need a bigger house," Michael said finally, and Tommy's face lit up like Christmas morning. Over the next few days, as Tommy recovered, the hospital room became a gathering place. Veterans came to visit Scout. Families who'd been saved by Duke brought flowers, and parents of children Bella had helped detect illness in came to pay their respects. The room was so full of flowers and cards it looked like a garden, but not everyone was celebrating. The federal agents hadn't given up. They'd filed legal papers claiming ownership of the dogs, citing their value as military assets and the investment in their training. They're saying the dogs are worth over $1 million in training costs, the Wilsons' hastily hired lawyer, Patricia Chen, explained. They want them returned for reassignment. "Reassignment to a laboratory," Tommy said darkly. "Scout shows me what they had planned. Tests for new drugs, experiments for combat enhancement. They want to hurt them to make scarier dogs." "We won't let that happen," Patricia assured him. "But we need to build a case. Prove that the dog's welfare supersedes any government claim." "I can help with that," Jake Morrison said from the doorway. He entered with a folder, thick with papers. "I've been making some calls. Turns out, our federal friends have been running an illegal program. Military dogs are supposed to be retired to handlers or qualified homes after service. Sending them to research facilities violates about 12 different regulations." "How did you find this out?" Patricia asked, already reaching for the papers. "Let's just say some people in the Pentagon aren't happy about heroes being treated like lab equipment," Jake replied. "This goes all the way up, but there are good people fighting from the inside." As they discussed legal strategy, Tommy had quietly gotten out of bed and was sitting on the floor with the 3 dogs arranged around him. His eyes were closed, and he was humming that strange, tuneless melody again. "Tommy?" Sarah called softly. "What are you doing?" "Listening," he replied without opening his eyes. "There are others. Other dogs that need help. Scout is teaching me how to hear them better." "Others?" Michael asked, concerned. "Tommy, you can't save every dog." "Not every dog," Tommy interrupted, opening his eyes. "But the ones that call out. The ones that are really scared and hurt and alone. Scout says that's my job now, to be a bridge." "A bridge?" "Between the ones who can't speak and the ones who won't listen," Tommy explained. "Scout says every generation there's someone who can do this. Usually it goes away when they grow up. But if you keep listening, if you keep caring, it stays." Before anyone could respond, Tommy suddenly stiffened. "Oh no," he whispered. "Oh no, no, no." "What is it?" Sarah asked, alarmed. "The facility," Tommy said, his face pale. "The place where we're going to take Scout, Bella, and Duke. There are already dogs there, 15 of them, and they're starting the experiments tomorrow." The room fell silent. Everyone looked at the small boy surrounded by 3 German shepherds, all 4 of them connected by something invisible but undeniably real. "Show me," Jake said quietly. "If Scout can show you, then tell me everything. We're not letting any more heroes suffer." Tommy closed his eyes again, and Scout moved closer, pressing his head against the boy's chest. "It's 2 hours north," Tommy began, his voice taking on that distant quality they'd all come to recognize. "A white building with no windows, underground levels. The dogs are in the basement. They're so scared. They're calling for help, but nobody can hear them." "I can get satellite images," Chen said, already pulling out her phone. "If we can prove what's happening there—" "We don't have time for proof," Tommy interrupted. "They're going to start with a dog named Ranger tomorrow morning. He's old. He served 4 tours. They're going to test something on his brain." The anger in the room was palpable. These people had all seen what Scout, Bella, and Duke had been through. The thought of more dogs suffering the same fate or worse was unbearable. "We need a plan," Jake said. "A legal, solid plan that doesn't end with us all in federal prison." "I have an idea," Patricia said slowly. "But it's going to require Tommy doing something that might be difficult." All eyes turned to the lawyer. If Tommy can really communicate with these dogs, if he can prove it in a controlled, documented setting, we might be able to argue that they're sentient beings deserving of rights, not property. It's a long shot, but there's precedent with great apes and dolphins. "You want to test Tommy?" Sarah asked, protective instincts flaring. "Not test," Patricia corrected. "Document, show the world what he can do, make it impossible to deny." Tommy looked at Scout, then at Bella and Duke. All three dogs were watching him intently. "They say yes," he said finally. "They say it's time everyone knew the truth. That dogs aren't things. They're people, just different kinds of people." "When?" Michael asked. "Tomorrow," Patricia said, "before they can start their experiments. We file an emergency injunction based on new evidence of sentience, and we broadcast Tommy's abilities live. Make it so public they can't hide what they're doing." Tommy stood up, looking small but determined between the three massive German shepherds. "Scout says we're ready." "All of us." As the adults continued planning, Tommy walked to the window, the three dogs following. Outside, the sun was setting over Riverside, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, the billboard that had trapped the dogs stood empty, a monument to what could happen when people chose to listen. "Tomorrow, we save the others," Tommy whispered. "And then—" Scout woofed softly and Tommy smiled. "And then, we change everything." The courtroom was packed beyond capacity when Tommy Wilson walked in, flanked by Scout, Bella, and Duke. Every major news outlet in the country had sent reporters. The gallery buzzed with whispers that died instantly when the small boy took his seat at the witness stand, the three German shepherds arranging themselves around him like ancient guardians. Judge Martha Harrison, a 70-year-old veteran of the bench who'd seen everything in her 40-year career, looked down at the unusual scene. "This is highly irregular," she said, though her voice held more curiosity than disapproval. "Mr. Wilson, are you comfortable?" Tommy nodded, his small hand resting on Scout's head. "Yes, ma'am. But Ranger isn't. Neither are the other 14 dogs. They're really scared right now." The federal prosecutor, a sharp-faced man named Richard Stone, stood up immediately. "Objection. The witness cannot possibly know the emotional state of animals 2 hours away." "That's exactly what we're here to determine," Patricia Chen countered smoothly. "Your Honor, we're prepared to demonstrate that Tommy Wilson possesses a documented ability to communicate with canines, particularly those in distress, and that this communication proves these animals are sentient beings deserving of legal protection." Judge Harrison leaned forward. "Young man, can you explain to the court how you know about these other dogs?" Tommy looked directly at her, his green eyes steady. "The same way you know when your sister is sad, even when she's in another state," he said simply. "Love makes connections we can't see, but for me, with dogs, I can feel it. Scout taught me how to make it stronger." "This is ridiculous," Stone protested. "Your Honor, we're wasting the court's time with a child's fantasy." "Then you won't mind a demonstration?" Patricia interrupted. She pulled out a tablet. "I have here a live feed from the Riverside Animal Shelter. There are 6 dogs there, each in separate rooms where they can't see or hear each other. If Tommy can accurately describe what each dog is doing and feeling without seeing this screen, would that satisfy the court?" Judge Harrison nodded. "Proceed." Patricia held the tablet where only she and the judge could see it. "Tommy, can you tell us about the dogs at the shelter right now?" Tommy closed his eyes, and Scout moved closer, pressing against the boy's leg. The courtroom held its breath. "There's a beagle in room 1, Tommy began. "He's spinning in circles because he's happy. Someone just gave him a tennis ball. He's thinking about his old family and hoping they come back." He paused. "Room 2 has a black lab. She's sleeping but having bad dreams about thunder. Room 3, oh." His face crumpled slightly. "Room 3 has a puppy. He's sick. His stomach hurts really bad. He needs a doctor." Patricia's face had gone pale. She showed the tablet to Judge Harrison, whose eyebrows rose dramatically. "He's completely accurate," Patricia said, "including about the puppy. I didn't even know it was sick." "Coincidence," Stone argued, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. "Then let's try something else," Patricia suggested. She whispered something to her assistant, who made a phone call. "Mr. Stone, would you please write down a command on this piece of paper? Any command you want. Don't say it out loud or show it to anyone." Stone scribbled something and handed it to the judge. "Now," Patricia continued, "my assistant is at the shelter. Tommy, can you ask the beagle in room 1 to do what, mister?" Stone wrote ? Tommy tilted his head, concentrating. Scout made a low rumbling sound in his chest, and Bella and Duke joined in. Not quite barking, more like a harmonic vibration that made everyone in the courtroom feel strange. "He says okay," Tommy announced, "but he wants 2 tennis balls as payment." On the tablet screen, visible now to the whole courtroom on a projection, the beagle suddenly stood on his hind legs and walked backward 3 steps, exactly what Stone had written. The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison had to bang her gavel repeatedly to restore order. "How?" Stone demanded, his composure finally cracking. "How is this possible?" "Ask them," Tommy said, pointing to Scout, Bella, and Duke. "They've been trying to tell humans things for years. You just don't listen. Scout wants to tell you about Afghanistan, about the children he found in the rubble, about how he knew which buildings had bombs before any machine could detect them. But you didn't want to hear that. You just wanted him to be a weapon." Scout stood up and walked over to Stone, who instinctively backed away. The German Shepherd sat down and raised one paw, the military salute Jake had taught him years ago. Then he did something no one expected. He whined, a soft, almost musical sound, and tears, actual tears, rolled down his face. "He's crying for his brothers," Tommy translated, his own voice breaking. "The ones who didn't come home. He remembers all their names, Rex, Titan, Zeus, Apollo. He dreams about them." Even Stone had gone quiet, staring at the crying dog. "Your Honor," Patricia said softly, "we'd like to present evidence about the facility where the 15 dogs are currently being held." "Proceed," Judge Harrison said, her voice unusually rough. Jake Morrison took the stand next, presenting satellite images and shipping manifests. This facility received 15 military dogs 6 days ago. According to these documents, they're scheduled for enhanced interrogation resistance testing, starting today. "What does that mean?" Judge Harrison asked. "They're going to torture them," Tommy said bluntly from his seat, "to see how much pain they can take before they stop following orders. Ranger is first because he's the oldest. They figure he'll break fastest." "Objection!" Stone shouted. "The witness cannot possibly—" "I have Ranger's service record here," Jake interrupted, holding up a folder. 8 years of service, 67 confirmed lives saved, 3 Purple Hearts, and you want to torture him to improve your program? The courtroom was deadly silent. Judge Harrison looked at Stone. "Is this true? Is the government planning to conduct pain resistance experiments on decorated service animals?" Stone shuffled his papers. "The research is classified, Your Honor. It's for national security." "National security?" Tommy stood up, his small body shaking with rage. "Ranger lost his eye saving a kindergarten class from a bomb. Bella found cancer in 43 children who would have died without treatment. Duke can't breathe right because he ran into a burning building 6 times to save a family. What more do you want from them?" "Tommy," Sarah called softly from the gallery, but her son wasn't finished. "You want to know what Ranger is thinking right now?" Tommy asked, his eyes blazing. "He's thinking about his handler Marcus, who died in his arms. He's wondering if Marcus would be ashamed that he got captured. He's hoping someone will remember that he's good, that he tried his best, that he was brave even when he was scared." Scout walked over to Tommy and gently nudged him back into his seat, then positioned himself between the boy and Stone like a shield. "Your Honor," Patricia said, "we're asking for an immediate injunction, preventing any experimentation on these animals and recognition of their status as sentient beings entitled to protection under animal welfare laws." "That's absurd," Stone argued. "They're military property." "They're veterans!" someone shouted from the gallery. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly woman who'd first recognized Scout. "They served our country. They deserve respect." The gallery erupted in agreement. Judge Harrison had to threaten to clear the courtroom to restore order. "I need time to consider this," Judge Harrison said finally. "Court will recess for—" "There is no time!" Tommy cried out. "They're taking Ranger now. I can feel it. He's so scared. Please." Judge Harrison looked at the boy, then at the 3 German shepherds who had all stood up, alert and agitated. "Mr. Stone," she said slowly, "I want you to call that facility right now and confirm that no experiments will begin until I make my ruling." Stone pulled out his phone, dialed, and had a brief conversation. His face went white. The experiment has been postponed," he said quietly. "Because?" Judge Harrison prompted. "Because the subject, Ranger, appears to be having some kind of episode. He's howling continuously and the other dogs have joined him. They can't get near any of them." Tommy closed his eyes. "They're singing," he whispered. "They're singing the soldier's song." The one their handlers sang in Afghanistan. They're telling Ranger to be brave, that help is coming. Judge Harrison stood up. Mr. Stone, I'm issuing an immediate temporary injunction. No experiments, no procedures, nothing until I complete my review. And I want a welfare check on those animals within the hour. Your Honor, within the hour, Mr. Stone, or I'll hold you in contempt. As Stone made more phone calls, Tommy suddenly gasped. Something's happening. The dogs at the facility. They're doing something. On his phone, Jake was receiving texts from contacts. His face went pale. Your Honor, I'm getting reports that military and service dogs all over the country are howling, simultaneously. Hundreds of them. Patricia quickly pulled up social media on her tablet. Videos were flooding in from everywhere. Police K-9 units, service dogs in hospitals, therapy dogs in veterans centers, all howling in the same pattern, the same rhythm. They're all connected, Tommy said in wonder. Scout and Bella and Duke, they're telling all the dogs what's happening. They're asking for help. The courtroom had fallen into stunned silence. Even Judge Harrison sat back down, staring at the boy and the 3 German shepherds. It's not just them, Tommy continued, his voice growing stronger. It's all of them. Every dog that's ever served, ever helped, ever saved someone. They're saying enough. They're saying they're not things. They're family. Duke suddenly walked to the center of the courtroom and sat down. Despite his scarred throat, he began to howl, a deep, mournful sound that seemed to carry all the pain and loyalty and love of every service dog who'd ever lived. Bella joined him, her voice higher, almost like singing. Then Scout, his howl carrying notes that spoke of desert nights and fallen friends and promises kept. And from outside the courthouse, answering howls began. The K-9 units in the police cars, therapy dogs in the nearby hospital, pet dogs in homes throughout Riverside. The sound grew and grew until it seemed like the whole world was singing this ancient song of loyalty and loss and love. Tommy stood up again, tears streaming down his face. They're saying thank you, he translated. Thank you to everyone who ever loved them. Thank you to everyone who saw them as more than tools. And they're saying, please, please don't let us disappear into darkness. Please remember, we feel everything you feel. Judge Harrison was crying. Half the courtroom was crying. Even Stone had turned away, his shoulders shaking. Your Honor, Patricia said softly, I'd like to present one more piece of evidence. She nodded to Tommy, who walked over to Stone. The prosecutor flinched, but Tommy just held out his small hand. Touch Scout, Tommy said simply. Just once. Let him show you. Stone looked like he wanted to refuse, but something in Tommy's eyes made him slowly reach out. His fingers barely brushed Scout's fur when his whole body went rigid. His eyes widened, pupils dilating, and for 30 seconds he stood frozen. When he pulled his hand back, he was sobbing. I saw it, he gasped. I saw it all, the war, the children he saved, the bomb he found that would have killed dozens, the nights he stayed awake to guard sleeping soldiers, the day his handler died, and he tried to drag him to safety even with 3 bullets in his body. Scout walked over to Stone and, incredibly, licked his hand. The prosecutor fell to his knees, wrapping his arms around the German shepherd. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. Judge Harrison stood up. I've seen enough. Tommy Wilson, please approach the bench. Tommy walked forward, all 3 dogs flanking him. Young man, the judge said, her voice formal but kind, what you've shown this court today challenges everything we thought we knew about the relationship between humans and animals. I'm not just granting the injunction, I'm recommending immediate legislation to protect all service animals from exploitation. They've earned their retirement, their peace, their dignity. The courtroom exploded in cheers, but Tommy wasn't done. What about the 15 at the facility? He asked. Judge Harrison smiled. Mr. Stone, I believe you have some calls to make. I want those dogs released to appropriate rescue organizations immediately. Stone, still kneeling beside Scout, nodded. I'll make it happen personally, he said, his voice hoarse. And Your Honor, I'm resigning from this case, from this whole program. I can't be part of this anymore. As people celebrated, Tommy felt a strange sensation. Scout, Bella, and Duke all pressed close to him, and suddenly his mind filled with images, not just from them, but from dogs everywhere. A golden retriever pulling a child from a pool, a small terrier alerting to a diabetic crisis, a massive mastiff standing between a woman and an attacker, thousands of stories, thousands of acts of love and courage and sacrifice. "We need to tell their stories," Tommy said to his parents. "All of them. So people remember. So this never happens again." 6 months later, the Wilson family stood in front of their new home, a small farm outside Riverside with enough room for their expanded family. Scout, Bella, and Duke were there, of course, but also Hope, the tiny puppy who'd almost died, now a thriving young dog, and Ranger, the old warrior they had saved from the facility, who spent his days sleeping in the sun and his nights curled up beside Tommy's bed. The other 14 dogs from the facility had all found homes with veterans and first responders, people who understood their service and their sacrifice. But they visited often, and when they did, Tommy would sit in the middle of them all, translating their stories for anyone who would listen. The billboard where it all began had been converted into something beautiful, a memorial to all service animals. At its base was a plaque that read, "They hear us when we cry. They comfort us when we break. They stand between us and danger. They ask for nothing but love. Remember them." Tommy's gift had grown stronger, but also more controlled. He worked with Dr. Vasquez and a team of researchers, not to be tested, but to help them understand the deep connections between humans and animals. He'd helped locate dozens of lost pets, comfort hundreds of traumatized rescue dogs, and even testified in Congress about animal welfare laws. But the most important work happened in quiet moments. Like now, as Tommy sat on the porch with Scout's head in his lap, Bella pressed against his side, and Duke standing guard, as always. "Tell me about today," Sarah said, sitting down beside her son. Tommy smiled. "Scout met a little girl at the hospital. She was scared about surgery. He let her hold his paw and showed her how brave she could be. Bella found another sick kid. The doctors are checking now, but she's never wrong. And Duke." He looked at the scarred German shepherd. "Duke just sat with Mr. Morrison while he cried about Afghanistan. Sometimes that's all anyone needs." Michael came out with Hope and Ranger, both dogs immediately joining the pile around Tommy. "The news wants another interview," he said, "about the new protection laws." Tommy shook his head. "Not today. Today we're just family." As the sun set over the farm, casting golden light across the fields, Tommy felt the now familiar sensation of connection, not just to the dogs around him, but to all the dogs everywhere who needed help, who needed a voice, who needed someone to listen. "There's another one," he said suddenly. "In the city, stuck in a hot car. We need to call someone." His parents no longer questioned these moments. Michael was already pulling out his phone, ready to contact the authorities with another anonymous tip that would save another life. "You know what Scout says?" Tommy asked, looking up at his parents. "What's that, buddy?" "He says the best thing about humans is that you can learn. Even when you've been wrong, even when you've been cruel, you can learn to be better. That's why dogs keep loving you, even when you don't deserve it. Because they believe in who you could be." A year later, at the first annual Service Animal Recognition Day, Tommy stood before a crowd of thousands. He was 6 now, a little taller, but still small beside the 3 German shepherds who never left his side. Hope sat by his feet, and Ranger, though moving slowly with age, had insisted on coming. "People ask me how I talk to dogs," Tommy said into the microphone, his voice clear and strong. "But that's the wrong question. The real question is, why did we stop listening?" The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Every dog has a voice. Every animal has feelings. They love, they fear, they hope, they grieve. Scout dreams about his handler who died. Bella remembers every sick child she's helped. Duke still runs into fires in his nightmares, trying to save everyone. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Veterans with their service dogs, families with their pets, researchers, politicians, people who'd followed the story from the beginning. They don't ask for much. Food, water, safety, and love. That's it. But we owe them so much more. We owe them respect. We owe them dignity. We owe them the chance to live their lives free from pain and fear. Scout stood up and walked to the microphone, placing his paw on Tommy's hand. Together, boy and dog, they represented something new, a bridge between species, a hope for better understanding. "Scout wants me to tell you something," Tommy said. "He says thank you. Thank you for seeing him. Thank you for hearing him. Thank you for remembering that inside every service dog, every military dog, every working dog, is a heart that just wants to help, that just wants to love, that just wants to belong." The crowd erupted in applause, but Tommy wasn't finished. "But there are still dogs out there who need help. Still animals suffering in silence. So please don't let this end here. Listen to your pets. Really listen. Watch them. Learn their language. They're trying to tell you things all the time." He looked directly at the cameras broadcasting the event live. "And if you ever see an animal in trouble, don't wait for someone else to help. Don't assume someone else will care. Be the person who stops. Be the person who listens. Be the person who acts. Because sometimes the smallest voice, a child's or a dog's, can change everything." As Tommy left the stage, Scout, Bella, and Duke flanking him, Hope prancing alongside, and Ranger bringing up the rear with slow dignity, the crowd began to chant, "Thank you! Thank you! Thank you!" But Tommy knew they weren't thanking him. They were thanking the dogs, all the dogs who'd served, who'd sacrificed, who'd loved unconditionally despite everything humans had put them through. That night, back at the farm, Tommy sat in his room, surrounded by letters from children all over the world who claimed they too could hear animals now, that his story had awakened something in them. "What do we do with all of them?" Sarah asked, looking at the hundreds of letters. "We teach them," Tommy said simply. "Scout says that's why this happened, not just to save him and Bella and Duke, but to remind people that we're all connected, humans, animals, everything. We just forgot how to feel it." He picked up one letter from a girl in Japan who said her cat had warned her about an earthquake, another from a boy in Brazil whose dog had detected his grandfather's heart attack. Story after story of connections made, lives saved, bonds strengthened. "Scout says this is just the beginning," Tommy whispered, the German shepherd's head heavy on his lap. "He says more children will learn to listen, more animals will find their voices, and maybe someday we won't need translators like me, because everyone will remember how to hear." Outside, a dog howled in the distance, not in pain or fear, but in greeting. Scout's ears perked up, and he howled back, then Bella, then Duke, then Hope, and even old Ranger managed a weak but determined howl. "What are they saying?" Michael asked from the doorway. Tommy smiled. "They're saying goodnight. They're saying we love you. They're saying tomorrow will be better than today." As the family settled in for the night, Tommy made one last check on his phone. The video of the rescue had now been viewed over 100 million times. The protection laws had passed in 40 states. Thousands of service dogs had been adopted into loving homes. But more importantly, something had shifted in the world. People looked at their dogs differently now. They listened more carefully. They paid attention to the small signals, the quiet needs, the unspoken love. "Hey, Scout," Tommy whispered in the darkness. The German shepherd's tail thumped against the floor. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for trusting me with your voice." Scout stood up, walked over to Tommy's bed, and did something he'd never done before. He spoke, not in barks or whines, but in the way Tommy had always heard him, except this time, out loud, in a voice only Tommy could hear. But somehow he knew others would learn to hear too. "No, Tommy. Thank you for listening when the whole world had gone deaf. Thank you for being brave when adults were afraid. Thank you for reminding everyone that love doesn't need words. It just needs an open heart." Tommy hugged Scout tight, feeling Bella and Duke press close, Hope squirming between them, and Ranger's comforting presence by the door. Tomorrow, there would be more dogs to save, more stories to tell, more connections to make. But tonight, in this moment, a boy and 5 dogs who'd changed the world were simply a family, bound by something stronger than words, deeper than understanding, bound by love that transcended species and spoke in a language everyone could learn if they just remembered how to listen. The storm that had brought them together was long past, but the rainbow it left behind, a bridge between human and animal consciousness, would last forever. And somewhere out there, in shelters and homes and facilities around the world, dogs lifted their heads, knowing that finally, Someone could hear their song. Tommy closed his eyes, surrounded by his pack, and whispered one last thing. "We're just getting started." And in the darkness, 5 tails wagged in perfect unison, agreeing completely. If this incredible story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with everyone you know. Let's spread awareness about the amazing bond between humans and animals. Comment below. If you've ever felt a special connection with an animal, we'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing emotional stories that will restore your faith in humanity and the incredible relationships we share with our animal friends. Together, we can make sure no animal's cry for help goes unheard. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change your perspective on the world around us. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages.